This happened about 2 years ago, early October. I'd been working a lot at the time, and I realized I was barely spending real time with my son. He was 7 back then, not a baby, but still young enough that he genuinely wanted to hang out with me, and I knew I wasn't going to get that forever. So one weekend I decided we were going hiking. Nothing intense, nothing dangerous. Just something simple we could do together without turning it into a huge, exhausting trip. I found an easy family loop trail online. It had good reviews, and everything about it sounded like the safest option possible. We got there late morning. The parking lot wasn't empty either, which I liked. There were a few cars, a couple groups of hikers, someone with a dog, and a few older hikers stretching like they did this every weekend. It felt normal, and it made me relax immediately. My son was excited in that full kid way, running ahead, stepping on crunchy leaves, pointing out birds, asking a million questions. We started walking. The first part of the trail was perfect. Sunlight through the trees, that clean forest smell, dirt path. And the further we went, the quieter it got. For the first 20 minutes, nothing felt wrong. But then I noticed the lack of signs that other people were out there. No voices, no distant footsteps, no snapped twigs, no fresh scuff marks on the leaves. You know when a trail is active. Even if you don't see people, you can feel it. This one felt untouched. I tried to rationalize it immediately. I didn't want to be that paranoid dad staring at the ground like an idiot. So we kept going. The trees got thicker, the air got colder, and my son got quieter. Not scared exactly, just focused, like he was listening. He started walking closer to me, not holding my hand, but close enough that I could tell he wanted to stay near. Then, my son said something that should have sounded like nothing, but to be honest, it was strange. He asked if we were walking in circles. I laughed at first, because it felt like a typical kid thought, like he just didn't understand what a loop trail was. So I told him we were fine, that it was a loop, that it was supposed to circle back. But he didn't drop it. He kept staring forward like he was trying to recognize something, and I could tell he wasn't joking, he wasn't being dramatic. He genuinely thought we'd already been there. That gave me this weird pinch in my stomach, because the way he acted wasn't playful at all. So I slowed down and actually looked around. And yeah, it did look familiar. Not exactly identical, but the rocks, the curve of the trees, the way the light hit the path, it had that déjà vu feeling. I didn't like it. But again, I forced the normal explanation. I told him he was probably just tired and that trails all looked the same after a while. And then we heard footsteps behind us. And instantly I thought, oh, great, there are the people from the parking. We are okay. But after a few minutes, I realized the footsteps sounded off. It wasn't like someone walking normally. It sounded like someone trying to match our pace. When we stepped, they stepped. When we slowed down, they slowed down. And I got that cold feeling down my spine, like I literally got goosebumps all over. Then I stopped, like fully stopped, and my son stopped too. And that's when it got terrifying, because the footsteps stopped at the exact same time. I didn't know what to think, and I didn't want my son to see that I was tense or scared. But then he leaned closer to me and told me not to look. And I remember thinking, what do you mean, don't look? Why wouldn't I look? Why would a 7-year-old even think to say something like that? But I still turned around slowly. The trail behind us was empty. No hikers, no dog, no sound. Just the trees. It was so strange. I honestly had no idea what we had been hearing. Then my son grabbed my sleeve and told me it was happening again. I asked what he meant, but my voice came out too sharp. I was trying not to panic, but with all the footsteps and sounds around us, it was hard. He pointed at the ground behind us, and I looked. Oh God, why did I look? There were fresh footprints right behind us. Not mine and not his either. Bigger steps, barely visible but definitely there, like somebody had been walking right behind us and then stopped, except there was nobody there. And that was the moment my blood went cold, because there wasn't a normal explanation for that. I grabbed my son's hand and started walking faster. Not running, just faster, because I didn't want him to panic. but I wanted distance. I wanted the parking lot. I wanted other people. And as we walked, my son started saying things that made it worse. He told me it was copying me, that the steps were stepping exactly when I stepped. And in my head, I was like, what does he mean, it? Who is it? I wanted to tell him to stop talking like that. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I could literally feel fear getting stronger the more we spoke about it. And then everything changed, because we heard heavy footsteps, fast and aggressive. Like someone was running straight toward us through the trees. And the worst part was how close it sounded, like it wasn't far away at all. It wasn't an animal. It didn't sound random. It sounded human, like full-speed boots hitting the ground, branches snapping, leaves getting crushed. And for a second, my whole body froze, because I genuinely thought someone was about to burst out of the trees and grab us. But still, nothing attacked, nothing jumped out. But that sound alone was enough to make my son start crying, and there was nothing I could do. I just kept moving faster, almost dragging him, and I was scanning the trail for signs, because at some point that loop should have started curving back. I just wanted to see anything that proved we were going the right way. And then we passed the same fallen tree again. The exact same one, a thick trunk across a small ditch, with that weird branch that looked like a hand. I knew it was the same because earlier my son climbed on it and I made him get down. But now we were seeing it again. That's when the panic hit me for real. Because, okay, footsteps, weird sounds, fine. Maybe paranoia, but you can't walk a loop and see the same landmark twice unless you're circling, or unless something is keeping you circling. I stopped and pulled my phone out. No signal. And that's when my son looked up at me and said something that made my stomach drop. He said it like he wasn't guessing. He wasn't making it up, like he just knew. He basically told me it wanted us lost, and I know how insane that sounds. But in that moment, it didn't feel like a kid being dramatic. And then everything changed because we heard it. A sound from the trees behind us that made my whole body freeze. It wasn't footsteps anymore, and it wasn't an animal either. It was this horrifying sound. Like something forcing air through its throat. Something broken, something not human. And I swear to God, I don't know any wild animal, or even a domestic animal that can make a sound like that. And when we heard it, we just stood there for a second, completely numb. I felt like throwing up, because that wasn't a prank. I didn't have any reasonable explanation, and I didn't know what to think. Was it somebody crazy? Or maybe homeless person? Maybe some wild teenager trying to mess with us? And for a second, I even started thinking it wasn't a person at all. I just wanted to leave as fast as I could. So I grabbed my son and we started running. Not some movie sprint, but that terrified run where you don't care if you trip, you just want out. And as we ran, the footsteps in the trees ran too, keeping our pace. Like it didn't need to catch us. It just needed to stay close. I don't know how long we ran. It felt like forever. It might have been 5 minutes. But finally, we broke out into an open area, a viewpoint, a little clearing with rocks. And there were people there, 2 hikers sitting down, drinking water, chatting like everything was normal. The second I saw them, I almost collapsed. I walked straight to them and tried to sound normal. I asked if they had seen anyone behind us. And they looked confused. The guys said no, just us, and I felt relief for half a second. Then the woman frowned and said something that made my heart stop. She said she was pretty sure we shouldn't be out there with a kid that late in the season. My son squeezed me so hard, I felt his nails through my hoodie, clearly frightened. The woman paused like she didn't want to say it out loud, like she was choosing her words carefully. Then she said something that made my blood go cold. She said that sometimes people hear themselves, that there is something in this forest, but only the locals know about it. She asked me how we knew about this place, and I said from the internet. The rating was high, and the reviews were very good. I can say she looked very confused, like she didn't know this place could be found online. And that hit me instantly. Maybe it was all a scam. because I can say there is something in that forest people already knew about, but nobody wanted to talk about it. The woman stood up and said they'd walk us back to the parking lot. And the second she said that, the forest went quiet again. She also told me there was another way back, a different path that goes around the forest instead of cutting through it, and that it stays more open and doesn't go deep into the trees. I didn't even hesitate. I just followed them because at that point, I had no idea what was real anymore, and I just wanted my son out of there. We walked fast without talking, and after a few minutes, the trees started thinning out, and I could see the parking lot ahead through the branches. Finally, we reached the cars and just stood there shaking, staring back at the trail entrance. Then the woman said something that stuck with me. She said a lot of people had gone missing in that forest, not like one or two, a lot. And she couldn't tell me if they got lost, if someone took them, or if something else happened. She didn't pretend to know, but she also admitted that she and her husband had heard strange things out there before. Sounds, voices, things that didn't make sense. But I didn't want to know more, so I got into the car, threw my son inside, locked the doors, and just drove. But honestly, the scariest part didn't even happen in the forest. It happened later that night when we got home and I couldn't sleep. So I grabbed my phone and tried to look up that trail again. I wanted to read the reviews. I wanted to see if anyone else had mentioned anything weird. I just needed to know we weren't the only ones. But the page was gone. The trail was gone. The rating was gone. The reviews were gone, like it had never existed online at all. And that messed with my head more than anything else, because last night, when I first found it online, it had a high rating and people were calling it safe and family-friendly, and that's literally why we went there. So how does a trail just disappear in a few hours unless someone put it there on purpose? That's why I don't pick places from the internet anymore, because after that day, I stopped believing we were there by accident. This happened 9 years ago. It was late July of 2016. At the time, I was 27. My ex-girlfriend, Maya, was 26, and we'd been dating for almost 2 years. We were on a road trip in Washington State, and Maya kept saying she wanted to do something real, something outdoorsy, something romantic, like a proper couple thing with no phones, no noise, just the two of us in nature for a few hours. So I picked a hike inside Olympic National Forest. Not the touristy Olympic National Park stuff with crowds, signs, and rangers everywhere, but one of those quieter trails locals use. The kind of place where the forest is so big it feels endless, and the kind of place where you could scream your lungs out and nobody would hear you. We got there around 3 in the afternoon, and it was just a small gravel parking lot with maybe 6 cars. The trailhead looked completely normal. There were no warnings and no ranger booth, and there was no cell service either. But at the time, that didn't feel like a big deal. Maya even took a photo at the trail sign, smiling like it was going to be a memory for our future kids. And honestly, for the first part of the hike, it really was perfect, because we were walking under tall trees, sunlight was flickering through the branches, the air was warm but cool in the shade, and we were just joking around, talking about dumb plans, complaining about work. And I remember thinking this is exactly what she needed. And then we heard a whistle coming from somewhere far off the trail, deep inside the trees. I stopped walking for a second just to listen, and Maya looked at me and said someone was out there, and I just shrugged and said probably, but something about it didn't feel normal at all. We kept walking, and the whistle didn't come back right away. And for a few minutes, I managed to convince myself I was overthinking it. But then we heard it again, only this time it was closer. Maya's smile faded instantly, and she asked why someone would be doing that. And I said, I don't know. Maybe someone is just enjoying the nature. And I'm telling you, when you're deep in a forest and you hear a whistle like that, it doesn't feel casual or normal. It feels sinister. And then we heard something else, something that made the hairs on my arms rise. A low, strange call, almost like a yell. It sounded like someone making a noise on purpose just to let us know they were out there. And Maya grabbed my arm, asking what the hell was that? And I tried to laugh and said it was probably some dude messing around. But I didn't believe my own voice because it didn't sound like a person enjoying nature. He sounded like a crazy person or someone on drugs. We kept walking anyway because that's what people do. They ignore their instincts for the sake of not looking stupid. And now I hate that about myself. I wanted to go back. I had a really bad feeling about it. But Maya was so happy out there. She looked so alive. And I didn't want to ruin it. So I decided to just keep going. About an hour in, the trail narrowed, the trees got thicker, and the lights started to change, even though it was still daytime. And the forest became darker and quieter, like the air got heavier. And then we saw it, a piece of cardboard nailed to a tree with 2 rusty screws. Not an official sign, just something handmade, written in thick black markers saying, "No whistling." Maya stared at it and then looked at me like she wanted to turn around. And I said, "Okay, that's weird." And the second I said it, we heard the whistle again, but this time it wasn't far away anymore. It was close, way too close, like maybe 30 meters into the trees. And then we heard footsteps, not on the trail, but inside the woods. And Maya whispered that someone was walking right next to us. And I didn't even answer, just nodded. And the scariest part was that they weren't even trying to hide. They were walking just slow enough to stay with us, but far enough that we couldn't actually see anyone. Like they wanted us to know they were there, but they wanted the trees to do the hiding for them. That was when Maya finally said we needed to go back. And I didn't argue. We just turned around, and the second we did that, the whistling stopped, and the footsteps stopped too, at the exact same time. I got this cold, crawling feeling down my back, and I swear I had goosebumps everywhere. We started walking faster toward the trailhead, not running, just faster. We didn't talk because talking out loud in that moment felt stupid, like it would expose us somehow. And we made it maybe 5 minutes back when the whistling returned, only now it wasn't ahead of us anymore. It was behind us, and it sounded closer than before. Maya's breathing turned shaky, and I told her not to look back. And I don't even know why I said that. I just had this feeling that the second we looked, it would get worse. Then we heard a laugh, a creepy laugh, like something you'd hear in a psychiatric facility. Closer. Maya stopped walking for a second like her body just refused, but I kept pulling her because I could feel we were running out of time. Then we saw it on the trail in front of us, a fresh tree branch placed across the path, like a simple little barrier, and it hadn't fallen naturally. It was placed there on purpose. We stepped over it and kept going. Maya gasped, and I turned my head just enough to see movement through the trees, and there was a person. Tall and way too thin, with wild hair, and he was holding something long in his hand. And in that second, everything became real. Maya grabbed my arm so hard her nails actually dug into my skin, and I didn't even react. I didn't even look at her, because I was frozen too, trying not to make a sound. But it was too late. The fear hit so hard. My chest tightened, and my legs went weak for a second, and Maya's whole body was shaking next to me. I panicked, and in that moment we knew our lives depended on how fast we could run. And I kept telling her not to stop because in my head, if we stopped, we were going to die. Then we heard him shout, a real human voice, but the words didn't even make sense. It was just sounds like he was calling out in some language only he understood. The trail finally opened up a little, and we saw sunlight ahead, and then we saw the parking lot, and we pushed harder, even though my legs were shaking and my chest felt like it was tearing, because I could see the cars, I could see open space, and that meant safety. And that's when Maya screamed, because something flew past us and hit a tree right in front of her. It was a rock, thrown hard like a warning shot. She tripped and almost fell, and I grabbed her and pulled her forward, and behind us I heard laughter. I'll never forget that laugh, the most sinister laugh I've ever heard. Honestly, I still hear it in my nightmares. We reached the parking lot, and we didn't stop. We sprinted straight to my car, my keys shaking so hard I could barely get the door open. I unlocked it, shoved Maya inside, jumped in after her, locked the doors, and started the engine. As I drove away, Maya was sobbing in the passenger seat, and I kept checking the mirrors expecting to see him running after us, but I never did. All I saw behind us was trees, endless trees, like the forest just swallowed him the second we escaped. Later, we called the police, and they searched the area, but they found nothing. No campsite, no cabin, no weapon, no man. And the scariest part isn't what happened, it's what almost happened. Because if we hadn't turned back when we did, if we had kept going deeper and kept ignoring the whistle and the footsteps, I don't think we would have made it out. And I still don't know what he wanted from us. But when I saw that axe, I knew if he reached us, we were done. And even after all these years, I still can't go into the forest. I honestly think this is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. This happened about 15 years ago, back when me and my friend Mark were both 20. We were the type of guys who thought nothing could happen to us. We were young, loud, always looking for something new, and we genuinely believed we were strong enough to do whatever we wanted. We were obsessed with hiking back then. Every few weekends, we'd pick a random trail on a map, places that looked quiet and not too commercial because we hated crowds. We hated tourist trails, and we wanted nature to feel real. Mark picked this trail in Vermont. Nothing crazy, nothing extreme, just something he found on the map that looked like a clean day hike with some views. We got there early in the morning and the parking lot was completely empty. And at the time, I didn't think anything of it because we'd done hikes like that before, and honestly, sometimes being the first ones on a trail feels good, like you have the whole world to yourself. At the beginning, it was perfect. We were joking around, talking nonsense, making fun of each other's gear, and just taking stupid pictures. The trail was actually nice. Cold air, leaves everywhere, that early fall vibe. We felt good, and for the first hour it stayed like that. But after a while, the forest got tighter and darker. That's when we noticed we still hadn't seen a single person. No hikers passing us, or no dog walkers, nothing. And usually, even when we pick the most remote trails, we still run into at least one person at some point. Mark noticed it too, because he made this dumb joke like maybe we picked the VIP trail, but honestly, his voice was quieter than usual. A little later, we reached a split in the trail. One path went uphill, narrow and rocky, and the other dipped down into thicker trees where it looked darker. There was an old signpost there, sun-faded and messed up, and you could barely read it. Mark leaned in like he was studying it, and he said the lower trail was a shortcut that reconnects later. And before I could even properly argue, he was already stepping onto it. So I followed him, and within 5 minutes, I knew it was wrong. It didn't feel like a maintained trail anymore. It felt like the kind of route people stop using. It got rough, narrow, uneven, and we weren't really walking a path as much as stepping around roots and rocks, trying not to slide. And then we heard it. A faint metallic sound ahead of us. Not loud, not clear, just something that made both of us pause because it didn't belong out there. It happened again, and this time it sounded like chains. I remember asking Mark if he heard it, and he nodded instantly, which made my stomach tighten because it meant it wasn't in my head. We kept walking slower now, listening, and the sound came again and again, like it was pulling us forward. At one point, Mark stopped so suddenly I nearly bumped into him because he was staring at something on the ground. A strip of orange fabric. It was torn and muddy, like something had been dragged over rocks. Mark picked it up and turned it between his fingers and said it was weird. But I could hear his voice changing because deep down, both of us knew that kind of thing doesn't just fall off someone peacefully. Then we started seeing orange trail tape tied around branches, like someone had marked a route recently. At first, it honestly made me feel better, because at least it meant somebody had been here, and it meant there was still some kind of direction. We followed it without even talking about it, because it just felt like the obvious thing to do. But the deeper we got, the more wrong it started feeling, because the tape wasn't like official trail markings. It looked random, like someone tied it in a rush. And some pieces were lower than they should have been, and then suddenly it just stopped. No more tape, no more markers, nothing. We looked around, and all we could see were thick trees and shadows. No clear path, no footprints, no signs, nothing that could help you orient yourself. And my chest started tightening because it felt really strange and spooky. We tried to backtrack, but we couldn't find the marked trail. It was like the orange marks had disappeared, and everything looked the same. The same rocks, the same leaves, the same trees. And it honestly felt like the forest was literally swallowing the path behind us. We kept walking slowly, trying not to panic, trying to stay focused, but then we heard that metal sound again. That same sound. Metal scraping, not loud, but sharp enough that it cut through the silence instantly, and it came from deeper inside the woods, somewhere ahead of us. Mark looked at me, and I could tell he was trying to rationalize it, but his face was already different, because none of this was normal. There was no reason to hear metal out there. No cabins, no construction, no signs of anything. It was just forest. And then we smelled something chemical, like fuel or oil or something burned. And we both stopped without even saying anything, because that smell didn't belong out there either. We kept moving. But now it wasn't hiking anymore. It was searching, like we were trying to find the trail again before it got dark. We walked maybe another 10 minutes, and then we saw it. A tarp. A big, dark tarp hanging between trees like a wall. It wasn't a tent or a camping setup. It was just a tarp, stretched tight, low enough that it blocked the view behind it, like someone had made it on purpose so you couldn't see what was back there. And my stomach dropped, because that's not something you randomly find in the woods. Mark stopped dead and whispered my name, and I could hear the fear in his voice now. He didn't even try to joke anymore. We stood there staring at it, and then we heard the metal sound again. Oh God, seriously, that fucking metal sound. And this time, it wasn't ahead of us. It was behind us. Close enough that my whole body froze. And then we heard footsteps in the bushes around us. I honestly can't even remember exactly where they were coming from anymore, just that they were everywhere, and it became unbearable. That was the last straw. Mark turned and said we had to leave right now. And I didn't argue, because whatever that tarp was, whatever that sound was, it wasn't something we were supposed to see. We started running, not even caring about direction anymore, just trying to get away from that spot, and that's when I heard running behind us, leaves getting crushed, branches snapping. And I swear to God, it sounded like somebody was chasing us full speed through the trees. We ran like our lives depended on it, and the footsteps stayed right behind us, like whoever it was knew exactly where we were, even when we couldn't see anything, like they weren't struggling through the woods at all. Mark shouted something, I don't even remember what, because my brain was just pure panic at that point. And then he tripped, or slipped, or maybe he got pulled. I don't know. I just know he went down hard, because I heard him hit the ground, and I heard that sharp gasp he made, like all the air got punched out of him. I stopped instantly and ran back to him, because there was no way I was leaving him there. He was on the ground, choking for air, his eyes wide, totally panicked, and I grabbed him under the arm and yanked him up so fast I almost fell with him. And the second I pulled him up, I heard something moving close to us. Not just leaves, not just branches. Something fast, something heavy, like someone was right there. My whole body reacted before my brain did, like pure electricity, and I kept running. To be honest, I don't even think we were running in a straight line. We were just running, hitting branches, slipping, crashing through bushes, trying to find the trail again. While I was running, I didn't really hear anything. I think I was too busy trying to save my life. And then everything went quiet again. I couldn't hear any running behind us anymore. No branches snapping, no metal, no laughter. And for a second I thought maybe we actually got away. But then I realized something that made my stomach drop. I couldn't hear Mark. I turned my head while still running, and I saw nothing behind me. And that's when panic hit me harder than the chase itself, because I honestly didn't even understand how it happened. 1 second he was behind me, and the next second I was alone. I screamed Mark's name, loud, and without thinking I started going back to find him. And that was the biggest mistake I've ever made, because maybe 20 meters away from me, I saw someone. It wasn't Mark, it was a man. He was standing there between the trees like he'd been waiting, dressed in rags like he'd been living out there for years. And the second I saw him, I froze so hard, I swear I couldn't even breathe. And something in my head just snapped, because in that moment, I realized something really simple. If I kept going deeper into those woods, I wasn't coming out. So I turned around and ran. I ran like a maniac, not turning, not looking, pushing my body as hard as I could, not because I didn't care about Mark, but because I knew if I didn't get help right then, we were both dead. I ran harder than I've ever run in my life, and eventually I saw it, the parking lot and my car. I ran straight to it, yanked the door open, jumped inside, and locked the doors immediately. The parking lot was still empty. I sat there shaking, just waiting to see Mark come running out any second. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 3, and there was nothing. No Mark. I felt this sick heaviness in my stomach because I knew something had happened. That's when I pulled my phone out and called the police. I told them my friend was missing and that we got lost on a trail. I told them there was someone in the woods chasing us. I told them everything. The police got there faster than I expected, and right away they started firing questions at me. And honestly, they weren't just questioning me to understand. They were questioning me like I was a suspect. After that, they called a search team with dogs, and we searched for hours. And then, at some point, someone shouted over the radio that they found someone. My heart dropped, because in my head that could mean anything. I ran after them like an idiot, and when I reached the edge of this steep drop, I saw flashlights pointed into a ditch, and there he was, Mark. He was lying at the bottom of a small ravine, completely unconscious. Later that night, Mark woke up in the hospital, and he told them he saw a skinny, dirty man chasing him right before he fell into that ravine. He told them the same story as mine, but the police never found anyone. The scariest part was that we weren't lost. We were being guided somewhere, and we'll never know what that place was or what would have happened to us there. Mark survived, but he was never the same, and neither was I. This happened about a year ago, late November. Back then, I wasn't doing great mentally. I was stressed, tired, angry at everything, and I just needed to be alone for a few hours. So I picked a quiet trail. I just wanted to walk until my head went quiet. I got there around noon. The parking lot had only 2 cars. One of them was mine. The other one was an old dark SUV with tinted windows, parked way in the back like someone didn't want it seen. I remember thinking that was weird, but I still went in. For the first 15 minutes, everything was perfect. The air was cold, the trail was empty, the forest was quiet, and honestly, I felt better. Then I noticed something on the trail. A backpack. Not a hiking backpack, not a normal one. It looked like a school bag. It was just sitting on the side of the trail like someone dropped it and never came back. I slowed down and looked around, but I didn't see anybody. Then I noticed something a few meters ahead. A phone. Face down in the mud, cracked, and still on. And that's what made me stop completely. Because if a phone is still on, whoever dropped it couldn't have been gone for long. I picked it up, and the camera app was open, like someone had been recording, and then just dropped it. To be honest, at that point I was getting scared, because that phone didn't look abandoned. It looked interrupted. I just stood there, holding it, looking around, trying to decide what to do. And then I heard it. A branch snapped behind me. I turned fast. I only saw trees, nothing else. But I felt it. That feeling like I was being watched. I started walking back toward the parking lot immediately. And I tried to stay calm at first. I kept telling myself it was probably nothing. Maybe an animal. Maybe just my imagination. Or panic. But then I heard footsteps, heavy ones. Not normal hiking steps, fast steps, off the trail matching me. And that's when panic hit, because animals don't follow like that. And they don't match your pace like a person does. I started walking faster, and the footsteps got faster too. And then I made the dumbest mistake. I stopped. I wanted to see who it was. Maybe it was the person who owned those things. Maybe they dropped the phone. But when I turned around, I didn't see anyone. Still, I heard movement in the bushes, like someone was right there just a few meters behind me. But the second I turned, they stepped deeper into the brush, like they didn't want to be seen. And that's when I knew this wasn't an animal. So I ran. I didn't turn around. I couldn't, because I swear it felt like if I turned my head, I'd see a face 2 feet from mine. So I ran as fast as I could, not even thinking anymore. I just ran until the trees finally opened up and I saw the parking lot. And I swear, I felt relief so hard it almost made me weak. But then I saw something that made that relief disappear instantly. The SUV was running, the lights were on, and someone was sitting inside watching the trail entrance. I didn't even understand what was happening, but I knew one thing: I was not running to that car. And that's when the driver's door opened. Fast, a man stepped out, tall, dark jacket, and he didn't look like a hiker. Then he did something that still makes my stomach turn. He raised his hand and pointed into the woods behind me, like he was showing someone exactly where I was. And in that silence, I heard the footsteps again. Fast, coming straight toward me from the trees. I didn't even think. I ran sideways, off the trail, straight through the trees, crashing into bushes, getting scratched up, not caring where I was going, just trying to get out of sight. At some point, I threw myself into this thick patch of shrubs and literally crawled under branches until there was no way anyone could see me. I just stayed there. I didn't move, I didn't breathe loud, and didn't even blink. Minutes passed, then more minutes, and the light started fading. It got colder and darker, and I was sitting there shaking, covered in dirt, trying not to make a sound. I could hear footsteps moving through the trees, slow and searching. I heard branches snapping, leaves crunching, and at one point, I swear someone walked close enough that I could hear breathing. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours, until it was fully dark and the only thing I could see was the outline of the trees. And only when I was sure the woods were quiet again, I slowly crawled out of the bushes and started moving back toward the parking lot, step by step, trying not to make any noise. I could barely see my own hands, but that darkness was the only reason I even had a chance. I kept moving slowly until I reached the edge of the trees, and from there, I finally had a clear view of the parking lot. The SUV was still there, headlights on, engine running, so I didn't go straight to my car. I started circling around in the dark, staying low, using the trees to cover me, moving wide enough that they wouldn't catch any movement in their lights. I went all the way around the back of the SUV, holding my breath the entire time, and I swear I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Then I got to my car, but I still didn't jump in. I looked through the windows first, straight into the back seats, because I had this horrible thought that maybe someone was already inside waiting, but there was nobody. And only then I moved fast, not running, just fast and controlled, like a thief. I unlocked the door, jumped inside, locked it immediately, and started the engine, shaking so hard I could barely hold the key. And right before I drove away, I saw something on the edge of the trees right next to my car. 3 shapes, 3 men. And the second my headlights hit them, they started running straight toward me. I slammed the gas. In the mirror, I saw the SUV swing around and pull out after me. And for a few seconds, I genuinely thought I was done, because that wasn't just some random car anymore. It felt coordinated, like they were working together. But I was faster, and I'm not even someone who drives fast. I normally drive like an old man. But that night, I wasn't driving normally. I was driving for my life. I didn't stop at intersections. I didn't slow down. I didn't even look twice. I just kept going until I hit the main road and the trees disappeared behind me. I reported it to the police, but without a plate number or anything clear, there wasn't much they could do. I even asked if anyone had gone missing around that area recently, but they told me nothing had been reported. And I still don't know what would have happened if I'd been 5 seconds slower. I still don't know who that phone belonged to or why it was open on the camera app. And that's what messes with my head the most, because it means one of two things. Either that phone belonged to someone who didn't make it out, or the whole thing was set up so nobody ever does.